Welcome to another episode of the Being Human and Doing Psychotherapy podcast, where I, a gestalt therapist, Aleksandra, am trying to parse out what is the therapeutic thing that we have in all of us, and who are the people that are behind the role of the psychotherapist. And today I have a great privilege to be joined by Stephanie Sims. And Stephanie is a psychotherapist I met on a trauma conference in a very unusual circumstances, um, where I felt she was really starting to own her voice. And having a voice is something that I have struggled with for a long time. So Stephanie's courage and perseverance to be heard and to leave a mark was extremely inspirational. And one thing I was left with after that contact was a sentence you said, and I'm going to paraphrase, but maybe you can actually say it. It was something about, if you want to hear me and understand me, you are my people, you are my allies. Maybe that's not the exact sentence, but that's what I remember from it. Uh, Ah, so can you say something? Because can you actually show your shirt? Yeah, so welcome, Stephanie, because this is the perfect thing.
Absolutely. Um, Sorry about all that noise, and thank you for that introduction. And it's an honor to be here and to sit and see you and interact with you again. Um, yes, the what I said to people, I just want to connect and to be as authentic as I can because often we cannot always be authentic in our spaces. And
Mm,
so to be able to do that, and then there was about, a couple of thousand people there. And one of the things that I really wanted to drive home was just to say, you're my people if I'm your people. And like, I'm your people if you're my people. And that, a lot of people said that to me. And so you think about all the times we wear, name brand things. And I said, I want to wear something with meaning. So I have this shirt, you're my people if I'm your people. And I think that says it all for me. I
yeah.
really do.
Yeah, and I was,
Because who are we, right? Because you can't just go by, oh, we're the same people because we're female or because we're the same culture or color. No, there's other things we have in common that we can certainly connect with.
mm, and that is exactly what I was touched by in your not I don't want to call it appearance, that's not the right word, but in what you had to say and bring to the table then, because there was something about something not forceful, something very authentic about what you've said and what you've done. It was the opposite of othering. It was inviting. Um,
Thank you.
and that's I think what I resonated with and why I was really happy to invite you to be a part of the podcast. And connected to what you've just said, the first question I ask is, um, who are you when you strip yourself from all the identities that you associate
Mhm.
with?
I am passionate, compassionate. I'm always grateful for things big and small. Uh, and I felt like I've always been that person who stands up for other people.
Hmm.
And that's getting harder and harder sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's that's just what's always been in me. But those are all those things that sound awesome and amazing. But I'm also an overthinker, which is not always a good thing. Over analyzing, overthinking, and whatnot, and that can get in our way sometimes. So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
take all those things. All those things are me. So it can all be true at the same time.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
what are some, so you've said that you are standing for standing up for other people. What are some values that are kind of leading you through life, that you feel are somehow immutable or something that is at the core of who you are?
hmm Um, so I became a therapist later in life. And when I tell people who knew me before that I'm a therapist now, they go, we're not shocked, we're not surprised. Because innate to me has always been to help people, to
Mm,
be a helper, to be a listener. Like I said, more than one thing can be true. So I'm a talker. And as I became a therapist and learning more, I had to learn how to sit in the listening space too. And
mm,
that is so, the first word that comes to mind is juicy. It
mm,
is so profound to learn how to sit in that space and listen and hear and connect and all of that. So I think all of that has always been innate to me. And just becoming a therapist, just another door that opened and allowed me to learn and grow and, you know, match up,
mm,
what's in a book to what's in real life. So
mm.
I carry that with me too.
And you said you've become a therapist later in life. So what was your journey to get to that point, or parts of it that you want to share?
Sure, sure. I joined the United States Air Force at the ripe age of 18. So I spent 20 years in the Air Force, so that gave me the ability to be able to travel and meet other people and cultures, which was great. I mean, that opened up my world quite a bit. I'm originally from Southern California.
I was
So,
sorry. I was struck because the first thing I noticed was the photo behind you, and I was thinking like,
uh,
what is this? Because of the propeller, and I was like,
propeller.
yeah. And I was sitting
Mhm.
with like, how does this
That's
relate
not
to her?
therapeutic. I know. Yeah. And that's my husband's side. So, um, and so I'm the sum of my parts. I am the sum of my parts.
Mm,
So I spent 20 years in the military, still that person, that innate nurturer, helper, compassion, empathy, empathetic person. And after that, I ended up working at NASA as a contractor at the Space Center. And I went in there doing one job and I ended up doing something really amazing. And that was, I was able to speak. When they're launching missions, when they were launching humans back into space, I ended up getting a role where they wanted me to speak. So I got to sit on console with headsets on and contribute to that mission. So that was an amazing experience. And I got to interact and work with people who are different than me in different ways, right? But they became my people too. So
mm,
shout out to the engineers. All these parts are all of me, right? And you just learn that, yes, you have this label on, which I'm not big on that either, but they all had their different lives and contributions in the way they communicate and interact. So I learned a lot about being in that culture. And while I was doing that, the tail end of it, which is something I brought up at the master series in Oxford, I had always wanted to figure out the best way to help people and be able to sit across from them and help them out in their lives and in their world. So I said I want to become a therapist. So I was doing that and going to school to become a therapist. And so then I decided, I'm ready to jump in with both feet and be a full-time therapist, helping people, connecting people. That's my thing, regardless if I was in the Air Force or supporting the mission at NASA or if I'm shopping in the grocery store. I'm always connected to people or trying to help them, or I see more than what's on the surface and what their role is. I see the
mm.
human. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to connect to. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I'm left with is every time I interview is the uniqueness of human stories and our journeys and how we all get here in different ways. And that's why maybe I love the therapeutic field because there
Mm-hmm.
is so much of richness. in these stories, in how we winded up where we are now. So I would like to pause and explore those bits of you, that the
Sure.
pre-therapeutic bits of you, because I find it fascinating. So I wanted to see, I must say, I think you must be the first female officer I've met.
I'm
Uh,
not an officer,
Not
though.
the
I don't
officer,
want to.
but yeah,
In the
but someone,
military?
yes, but someone who has worked,
Wow.
but someone who has worked in the military. My dad is a military doctor, but I don't think I've met someone who has worked in the military. So I would, who is a female. So I would like to explore
Wow.
what was that like for you? What parts of you, how does it look like? Was that
Hmm.
what attracted you to it? How is it to be in the Air Force? Because I don't think I've also spoken with someone who was part of an Air Force. So
Yeah.
I'm just quite curious now.
I decided young that I was ready to grow and go.
Mm,
So, probably 3 years before or so, that's what I decided I want to do. Um, and I went in, and I thought I was ready and like, this is great. And I jumped in with both feet and I said, what am I doing? But you're used to being comfortable in your world, right? And then when you open up to something else, you have a whole different experience. I was 18 years old, right? But when you go in the military, at the time that I went in, I can't speak for today, everybody has the same path. So you have officers who go in with with a degree, and then you have enlisted. You can go in right after high school. So I was enlisted at the time. And but depending on what you're doing, your paths are all the same. So I spent a lot of time being trained, training, learning. And I had to assert myself because they teach you how to be a leader from day one. You have to learn that. And it's not something that comes later. They pretty much groom you into being a leader. So you have to be a good leader, you have to be a good follower and a good peer. So from the beginning, all of those things started, and that was a 20-year trajectory.
wow.
Yeah. So that definitely boosted my confidence. And, a lot of times people didn't look like me that I came across. And I mean that in culture and in gender, you know. And sometimes I would feel small or I would feel like I stuck out. And I got comfortable with that as time went on. So I see it now as here I am, take it or leave it. For some people, I'm for, and some people I'm not, and that's okay. But it won't change me. So I was able to evolve and grow, become a leader, a supporter, still a nurturer, because you got junior people coming in behind you. And it was an amazing and great experience for me. I met a husband, so there's that. And I have, two sons. And just meeting people, it helped me learn that it was okay to move on from where you were to the next thing because you change assignments, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my first assignment, I'm thinking, I don't want to leave. I won't have any more friends like this. This is going to be difficult. And this was before internet and, you know, on the phone doing videos and things. And I was so afraid to leave because I was going from Texas to the UK. So my first experience abroad, well, not abroad, living abroad, was being assigned to the UK. And so, but every time I moved somewhere or opened my world to a different space, I met more people, just like meeting you. So I always think if you don't take the opportunity to step in that place and open yourself up, you don't know what you could miss out on.
Mm-hmm.
So I met these new amazing people. You saw my friend Beverly. If I hadn't gone there, I never would have met her if I hadn't gone to the UK. And just my world just kept opening up every time I moved. So yes, I learned from that, I was afraid to leave behind people and I would miss them and miss that experience. But every time I stepped into a new place, it just opened up even more. I
Mm.
love that. I love
Mm.
that.
And
So,
I
yeah.
and I'm wondering, in that leadership training, what do you think was the support in the field for you to really get in touch with those characteristics of being a leader and a follower? And what humbled you, or what kind of lifted you up in those spaces? Because I imagine that training is not an easy training to go through.
No, it's not. But at different types, how do I say it? At different times, you are the leader or the follower, but someone is leading you. So maybe when you feel like, oh, this is too much or too hard, someone steps in and does that role. That's one thing about the military compared to what I call the civilian world, which is all things after that. It's very unique in the sense that you're trained to support people. You're
Mm,
trained to look after one another. When you go to a new place, you have someone there to, oh, this is the culture, or you can move here. Do you need a ride? Are you hungry? And that,
mm,
so you had that. You learn how to become a leader through that and academically, right? And then I had a shift in my perspective once when I was kind of like before mid career. And I'm like, where are my leaders now? Where are they? I need them. And that's when I kind of realized I'm becoming the leader.
mm,
Yeah, it's my turn to lead. But those things are not fixed or permanent. You might have to switch to being the follower, or you might have to support your peer. So that is like a living, breathing thing. It's not static.
mm,
And learning that was like a light switch that came on for me. So it's almost like assuming the role in the moment. And
mm.
that has always stuck with me,
Eh,
always.
As you're speaking about this, it reminds me of someone I interviewed, who's talked about leadership, about like when birds fly, there's always one that's leading, but then when they
Mm-hmm.
come down, they become all the same, and then someone else is able to take over in the next flight. So
Yes,
that is something I really like, the organic image of it, and not necessarily as something very fixed.
right.
Yeah, and I'm
It's evolving and living and breathing. It changes depending on the situation. The military is mission oriented. So whatever you're doing, whoever you're supporting or whoever you're following, it all has to do with the mission. So that's the common goal anyway.
Mm.
Yeah, that we all get there and we all are able to do that.
And as you are talking about that, I'm wondering what that taught you about how humans perform together, and what's necessary for people to what are the ingredients for people to effectively work together towards a common goal. And I imagine, yeah, military might have been a very good training for
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm. Because again, it's about the mission and we all believe or support the mission. And how we get there is, we have to take care of each other because
Mm,
it is about people also, because we're the ones that are actually doing the work. So you have to put that human element in it. You
mm.
can't do it without. Um, so I almost forgot a little bit about what you asked me. I went on a
So
tangent a little.
what that experience of things being about a mission taught you about human nature, and what support is needed in the field for people to
Mm,
actually strive for the common goal? Because I imagine, and you mentioned that people need to believe in what they're doing. Um, but I'm
mhm.
wondering, is there anything else you learned from that experience?
Just support. It may not always be easy and it's not always static. Sometimes you have to give it, sometimes you need it. So, and just know when it's your turn and
Mm,
what that role is at the time. Um, yeah, just
mm,
knowing what it is in the moment because
mm,
it does change and be flexible. Yeah,
mm,
I definitely learned about flexibility in the military. It applies in therapy too.
Mm.
You have to get out of your head who you think is coming in your door. You can read about them on a piece of paper, or maybe you talk to them a few minutes on the phone. But as a therapist, sit in that space of, I won't assume who's coming through my door. I have an awareness, but I won't assume who it is. You can get a completely different person from who you thought was coming through the door. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I appreciate that so much, and I've learned that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm now curious about the Air Force. So
Yes.
what did you fly with? How was that training look like? What was the scariest thing to do? It's almost, I feel like a child that is asking someone who is like
So I try to give people this perspective when they're not in the military, because when you say Air Force, people think everybody flies.
Yeah.
Or when they say Navy, everyone's on the ship, right? But it's not necessarily, we all support those people,
Yeah.
but it's just like a community. You still have people who know how to build things. You still have people who need to do the paperwork. You still have people you have, or needing somebody to fix airplanes,
Yeah.
right? So you need all those things in order to support that mission. So, not all of us are pilots. And I'm not saying you said that, but
Yeah.
a lot of people think that about military or Air Force. What did you fly? What did you do? Well, I'm not a pilot, but we support them.
So what was your
I
role?
got to ride in airplanes, so that was pretty cool always. And yeah, so
So
that
what
was
was
nice.
your role? What was your role in that system?
Yeah, I was an analyst in the military. So that enabled me to I even worked with other services. I
Mm-hmm.
worked with the Army and the Navy and the Marines. I worked with all of them.
Mm.
Um, so I was able to work with them in that way. I worked with people in other jobs. It's a lot of cross communication,
Perfect.
cross culture. So that's great. I love that. And that's still part of being open up to being human and understanding other people have different experiences than you. Um, you're unique sometimes, but they're still your people. They're still
Mm.
your people, right? Because you all have the same thing in common.
Mm.
Or if you don't, you still are open enough to be able to let them exist in the way that they are. Um, yes, we're military people, and you can even say, me being in the Air Force, we're all Air Force, but we all still come from different cultures and places in America,
Yeah.
right? We're not all the same.
And America is
Not
big.
We are not all the same. You might have someone from the Midwest or someone from the Northeast or from the South. So we have to get through that to be able to work together. So it's being able to connect to that human as well, which we do in therapy. All
Mm.
of that has contributed every step in my world, everything that has happened to me. It's all connected.
Mm.
Even being, in England, that I it's still hard for me to even talk about that sometimes. Um,
Mm.
it's a very unique experience that everything that I learned up until that point was poured into that moment. I feel that way about my life, period. Whether it was the Air Force, whether it was working at the Space Center, I went there to help with meetings or help support people. And then one day someone said, "Hey, would you be interested in voicing this for us?" And I'm like, "Sure." So, I use my voice, and they were like, "Huh, would you be interested in sitting with us and contributing to this?" So I went there as one thing and evolved into sitting among these brilliant people and being able to use my voice in support of that mission.
Mm.
Amazing. And then you think about what happened in England. I had no idea that I would be in that situation at all. I went to learn and, to absorb everything and to be in the audience. And what it evolved into was something completely different that will
Mm.
stick with me, for a long time, years to come.
With
So
me as well, and I'm wondering if you're willing to share that experience and what exactly was going on for you as you started to voice things, because I
mhm.
think um, I remember what was my experience, and I'm wondering what was going on through you.
Do you want me to start with mine, or do you want to start with yours
I'd rather hear
experience?
your first. Yeah.
So at this trauma conference, I was really excited because some of the top minds in trauma therapy were there all together, speaking in different ways and platforms. So went there with my friend Beverly. Like I said, in she's not a therapist, but human connections and whatnot. And you're looking at these brilliant minds on the stage, and you're hearing them talk, and it's like, okay, it sounds very familiar, sounds very status quo. And then what sparked my interest is when they started talking about some things that were going on in America. Now, mind you, I know this is not taking place in America, and it's not just about America, but it piqued my curiosity, and I'm listening, and I thought, oh, I want to ask a question. So in my head, I'm like, okay, how do I want to formulate this question? I like to make sure that when I open my mouth that it has purpose and meaning and not always just, you know. And so my question had to do with being a therapist and navigating through challenging times, especially as in this context, a therapist of color, because we had a very profound traumatic event to happen in our culture. And, my question was centered around how do I, as a therapist, a helper of others, get up, get myself together, and go sit in front of people, person after person after person, sharing the impact this tragedy had on them. And we know that people are troubled and struggling, and we have to sit in that space with them. What happens when you're feeling it too? You know,
Yes.
we
Yeah.
were all impacted. And so, person after person after person, the same story. And I'm like, how do we as therapists of color or of experiencing the same feeling as our clients, how do we navigate that? What's the best way? And I didn't feel like my question was really answered. Um, and I was just listening and waiting for the punchline, didn't really get an answer. And so I said, okay, this is not unfamiliar to me that I don't get an answer, or maybe people are kind of talking around what my question was. So I sat down. We're in this big, huge forum of thousands of people. So to be able to raise my hand and ask that question in that form was a lot. It was overwhelming. Um, so I sat down and just kind of like out of body in a way, like
Yeah.
this is what happens. And why is that surprising to me that this happened the way it did? And then
And
I'm
if I
sitting
can,
there and yeah,
sorry, if I can pause here to just say my piece,
sure.
when that happened, I felt as if you were invisible. I don't know how you felt, but I was sitting there and there was, because for me, the biggest contrast was because the topic before you asked that question was, oh, there is a lot of politics in trauma, and it was exactly the topic almost.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then I felt that question was really timely to what was discussed. Um, and then suddenly it felt like you did not exist. And I don't know how you felt, but I was like, this was almost like, I don't know how to explain, but a wood that falls in and no one hears the sound. And I just imagine how, I don't know, uh, when this happens to me, what happens is that I feel like I lose myself, um,
Mm,
um, almost as if like uh, I stop existing somehow. So that was my experience once
yeah.
this has happened, and I'm now curious what happened after that almost dismissal of your question.
Mhm. It's interesting that you feel that way and that you were impacted in that way by it, um, which proves that my people and your people in that moment, we were each other's people, right?
Mm,
So trying to always make a distinction to separate things is not always the answer. Yes, it felt like we're tap dancing, we're not going to answer that question.
mm,
And but it felt familiar
mm,
because this is what happens. This was not new to me.
yeah.
I just went, okay. I don't play golf, but one of the sayings that they say, which felt relevant, is, oh, that's par for the course. When
Mm,
it's too difficult or too challenging, it's easier just to not. So,
yeah.
yes, it felt that way, but I had that feeling before. And what's unfortunate is that I normalized it in that moment.
Mm,
So, as I was sitting there, um, the next person asked a question, and I felt that she was given so much support when she asked her question. It was completely different,
mm,
mind you, which is fine, but just so much love in the room for her, and so much support, and so much, we see you. And I
yeah.
don't know if you remember who asked the question after, but it had to do with her weight and how she saw herself and things of that
Yeah.
nature. And actually, she and I have spoken since then. Yeah. And I felt she was so supported and people showed her love and everything. And then I could feel myself kind of get like,
Angry.
and I said, I just need to leave because I could feel my mood shifting. And I wanted to go clear my head. So, because I didn't know what I wanted or needed in the moment, just that I needed to go self soothe. I needed to clear my head. And I told my friend I'll be back. And she said, okay. And then I can't remember her name, but she said, are you okay? Do you want me to come with you? Come sit with you? I said, I'm fine. She's like, I can come. And she was a white woman. She said, I'll come sit with you. I'll come with you. And I said, that's fine. Right. So we went out and I just found a corner in a room and I just sat. I just needed distance between that environment and my oxygen at the time. And we talked a little bit and she was like, that was horrible. What was really surprising to me is that other people felt that way. They felt that.
As you're speaking now,
That was
I'm
shocking.
feeling the anger. And it was the same anger I felt on the day. Um,
Yeah.
and what's often happening to me in big groups is that I hold that anger, forgetting to
Mm.
put it back into the field and not leave it with myself.
Yeah. I,
Um,
I have to process.
yeah,
I do. Um, and usually it's by myself first so
yeah.
I can figure it out. But collecting my thoughts and whatnot. But she was with me and we were talking and I know that I just kind of needed a minute.
Mm,
Um, and then I guess they took a break. And in comes my friend Bev, and in comes the lady that was with the lady that was sitting with me. So they were both British,
mm,
right? And they were like, no way. We need to go tell someone about this because this is unacceptable. And they even said to me, so many people stopped them and told them, because I think they recognized my friend Beverly was with me. There wasn't a lot of Black women, at this conference. And I think they recognized her being with me. She's British Jamaican. So, um, and the other lady was not, she was Caucasian, English, British. I don't know exactly, and they were both like, the solidarity, right? That you're my people piece. And they said, we're going to go find someone to talk to and I'm like, I just need a minute, no, no, no. So they went off and did that. So that sparked a conversation about how do we, I don't know what they thought at first. I don't know what their process was behind the scene, but uh, they came to me later and said, how can we repair this? So that was shocking also because that doesn't always happen in my world. I've had plenty of things happen to me that was dismissive, gaslighting, microaggressions, uh, that just went on and went by. And that's what I was used to. Like I was telling you, I'm like, this is not abnormal. And to actually have someone who wants to make amends, that was traumatic impact number two. Not used to that. So, how do we do this? And so they came up with later that they wanted me to ask my question again in a different form, and they were going to set aside time and let me ask my question again. And I thought about it and I said, if you want me to ask my question again, you need to invite me to ask my question again. I said, what I'm not going to do is try to fight and hold my hand up 10 times and, wait for my turn. And maybe I'll get a turn and maybe I won't. I'm not doing that. You can ask me. And so they said, okay, we'll invite you to ask your question again. And I said, oh, I'm okay with that. And they told me when it would happen. So I'm still processing. I think it was the next day.
Yeah.
So I had a little time, but I had so many people coming up to me and saying that was bad, that was wrong, that was not, I just tons of people. So when they made space in the program and they decided, let's address this, they literally carved out and postponed other speakers to let this happen. So, I'm grateful for that. As soon as we walked in, I'm just feeling that heaviness because I know this moment is coming. So glad I had my friend with me. Otherwise, I would have felt alone, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like I could trust her, right? And everyone else would have been new to me. I don't know who I can trust. I don't know who's supporting me or not, but I know her and I know she has my back and she's my people. And so we walked in and they were like, come have a seat up here. So we sat towards the front. And I thought, they kind of talked about what happened the day before. And I thought they were going to pass me the microphone for me to ask my question from the audience, but they invited me on the stage. So I stood up and I walked up to the stage. I didn't expect that, but that is what had to happen. That wasn't even, I felt like that was out of body.
Mm-hmm.
Not something I could say, oh, no, thank you. I had to be present for myself and for other people. When I told you I'm a defender and I stand up for others, I knew that wasn't just about me. I knew that. So even if I was nervous to go stand, just as I had to raise my hand and ask that question, right? I was nervous to answer and ask it again. I was nervous to go up on that stage, but I stood up without hesitation and went, because that's what I'm supposed to do. That was in support of the mission, right? That's all that comes back to me. And so I took deep breaths and went up there and ask my question. And yeah.
Yeah. And as I'm sitting listening to you speaking about this, there is something I wrote about, um, which is that I often speak from many voices and for many voices. And especially being a therapist, sitting in a room where we know that trauma basically kind of affects our ability to speak.
Yes. Yes.
It is so important for us as therapists. And week after week, I come to my supervisor's office saying, I don't know what to do, because there are spaces where I feel like I need to speak up for all the clients that are sitting in my office who I
Mm-hmm.
know uh, are are kind of fighting this. So it's not the work. Sometimes I feel, and I wonder what you feel. Sometimes I feel that the work we do in the therapy room is not enough for me. That if I do the work in the therapy room, but then go into spaces like this and don't stand up for the clients I work with, I feel I'm doing a betrayal of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing what people are structurally encountering day after day after day. So that's why I was quite impacted by your courage to actually do this and to recenter and to say, no, this is important enough for me to do it. And I'm really grateful for the model you offered on that day.
Thank you. It wasn't easy, but
Well,
it was necessary.
yeah,
Because if I just thought about it in context of it's about me and I get to ask my question and this, that, it wasn't.
no,
And I always think about when I was younger or a kid, anyone as a kid, there's so many things that you can't control or you have no impact over or no say so. And maybe that's where we learn to sit so quiet.
yeah,
But part of learning and growing and evolving always was, like I said, the military is a big part of that, that it was okay to speak. Also, in that moment, as I was answering that question and people were asking me questions, I didn't expect that either, right? I didn't expect that dialogue, but it's okay because it's not just about me. And if I'm a defender of people, if I'm a helper of people and whatnot, if nothing else, that's the part that has to speak.
yeah,
I, Stephanie, get to benefit from that.
yeah.
But, if you're thinking about it and speaking for others, then for me, that's what makes it easy,
Mm. And
necessary.
that's what I wanted to say. I have been in situations where that's what I was supported, and I was told, I know this is not an easy thing to do, but
Mm-hmm.
it is a necessary one. And I really, and I think that's even with the topic, which is difficult to maybe speak about, which I mean, I'm not sure how difficult it actually is, but I think it's perceived as difficult. Um, because I feel like when you are ready to engage with curiosity and openness, it dissipates the difficulty. But I guess because it's charged, there is a perceived threat. And I think that's why I was very attracted to the sentence of, if I'm your people, you're my people, because that dissipates the threat. And I think that's what makes us disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of my therapists, she said, fear breeds offense, which breeds defense. And I think as therapists, we are just really, it's really important to soothe our own fears so that we can then speak from a place that's integrated and bring
Absolutely.
the right kind of change and not just more division.
And that it goes back to remembering that it's not always about me. And when
Yeah.
someone comes in my office, it's completely not about me.
Yeah.
I understand how the world can perceive me. And I know everyone's not the same, but when I step into a room, there are some things that are obvious or
Mhm.
that stand out, that speak for me before I can even open my mouth, right?
Yeah.
And I understand that. And some people see that as threatening
Mm.
or difficult or challenging. And so when you start to have that dialogue, they start to understand, wow, what I thought I knew is really not so true.
Yeah.
And it's opening up and creating that space of being curious, right?
Yeah.
And being, wanting to learn and grow from that experience.
Mm.
And they also learn that I could be their people,
Yeah.
that connection that seems to elude us so much these days.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm always searching for it, trying to connect to it, and just help us take a breath and
Mm.
be okay. We won't all be the same or believe the same things or think the same things, but we can certainly be kind to each other and respect each other. And like I said that day, we don't have to lose part of ourselves in order to connect with someone. We don't have to do that. We grow. We
Yeah.
grow.
We add parts.
Absolutely. It's not a replacement thing.
No.
You just
No.
add more and more. Yeah. And
Yeah.
if I had that mindset, nobody likes me or everybody thinks I'm mean or all that, then that defensiveness would keep me from interacting with people.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm all about being curious and learning and growing always.
Yeah.
And maybe when people interact with me, they'll feel the same way too.
Yeah. And I would like to know what are the perceptions you encounter once you enter the room, because there was something that, as we were exploring diversity in my psychotherapy training, because I'm originally from Eastern Europe, so so I'm Serbia, and for me,
Okay.
it's
Thanks for
always
telling me you're
yeah,
Serbian because, people speak in regions and I want to know you. So, yeah,
yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
And for me, it was what was really I was really struggling when I came to the West, because the topic of race was not something that I was exposed to, at least growing up in a country which was unfortunately racially very homogenous. And so so difference was something else, as in like there were
Mm-hmm.
there were differences that were perceived, but race was not one of them. And once I came here, I was different. And also we have history of slavery. So
Mm-hmm.
there was something about being much more connected to people of color, not knowing really why, but not knowing that there is something when I enter the room is not the same as when you enter the room. And
Okay.
I explored this with a friend from my training, and she said, Alex, when you get your British citizenship, or somehow, and I started to realize somehow my kids are fine, and if they grow up in this country, the mask I kind
Yeah.
of brought for
Yeah.
them is enough to protect them.
Yeah.
But and then when we discussed this, I realized, yes, but if you are a person of color, that is not your choice, that you can't make that mask. And no British citizenship will change that. And I realized,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I see. Because
Mm-hmm.
that it was a very, and a lot of my clients who are people of color have really then kind of helped me understand, not that they helped me understand, but
No, I get it.
as I was witnessing their stories, it became more palpable. And so I'm just
Mm-hmm.
wondering, what is it that you were facing and you are facing that you're still facing? Because I think that was an important thing which Linda Tai spoke of, which is what has happened to your people and what's still happening to your people. And I'm wondering what is still happening to your people in that way, because I know that there are still a lot of structural barriers that you are facing that it's unfortunate, but it's true.
Yeah. And that's a big question. That could be a whole separate podcast, right?
Like, yes, absolutely.
But to try, I want to put it in context another way if I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's difficult. um, as because some people say they're Black, some people say they're African American, some people don't like that term. We're not a monolith, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that I would love if people didn't see us all the same, because we're not, right? We're all different regions, different cultures. Some people come here from the Caribbean. So although we share the same melanin, culture is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. So we have to allow for that too. The thing that I would love to get across, and I appreciate you for allowing me to say this, is um, my roots are American, right? And I get that. My DNA is majority African. But if you ask an African person, they'll say she's not African, right? Sometimes you can ask an American person and they'll say she's not American, because when you think of America, what is the visual image that comes up? It's not me. As a woman or a person of color, it's not me. So it's like, where am I and where do I fit? One of the challenges to me in America is people of color have gone through a lot in this country. There was times where we weren't included the same way. There were times where we had to build on our own and for our own, and that was even destroyed, right? So there's a long history there. But what's even more important to me at this moment, with everything that's going on in the world and how polarized we are, is I would love for people to see us as Black Americans or African Americans who immigrate to America, not as someone to be pushed aside and say, oh, well, you guys are this way, and all you have to do is do this. But the only way they can do what they do is because we did what we did. We were the first and had to deal with and go through to get where we are.
Yeah.
Right? So for people to come into this country, we are a stepping stone, whether it looks that way or not. We did a lot of work. We did a lot of the groundwork, right? As people of color. And of course, there's allies, but people of color did the groundwork. But we feel sometimes we're the most disregarded and disrespected. And I don't know if it's because of the image that's shown, images that are shown of what we're like. And then people get to know us and see something different. But I want people who immigrate to understand that we are not all one like that. And we were a substantial part of this culture and the building of this country. And we are not to be disrespected or disregarded. I just feel culturally, I found this in other countries too. Someone has to be on the bottom, right? You have to feel like you're better than someone for some reason. This is just my observation, even in other countries. But it's very disheartening when people immigrate to America and feel like the person on the bottom is someone who looks like me. I've been here. My people, my ancestral people have been here. I know for a fact that my great grandparents were here. So, for someone to step into the country, and after 6 months or 5 years or whatnot, know the lay of the land, they're missing that piece of it, which is an important part of the structure, which even holds them in place. So I would ask that they be mindful of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and actually my like maybe additional question, but you may have partly answered it, is what part of your story gets lost based on the assumptions people make about you. And I think partially this is what you've just said.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I wonder if there is anything that you want to add.
Absolutely, because people can see me today in the here and now and say, oh, you're educated, you're doing well, you have your own practice. Okay, so what do you have to complain about? You're doing great. But the
Mm,
part that gets lost is the person who got there. Have not always been that person. And even in this space, in this day and time, I still have to fight. I said that during the conference. I said that there are times where you still have to live to fight another day.
mm,
And we don't always get to take that breath or get to breathe because there's still someone out there ready to disregard and disrespect. So I think people get lost in believing, oh, you're a veteran or you know, you worked at this place and oh, you have your own practice. That's great. That's where I am, but I haven't forgotten who I am.
mm,
Very key and a
yeah,
very important part of who I am as a human being. So I don't let that get by people,
yeah.
right?
And
As they celebrate who I am today, I don't
today.
let that other part get by, right?
And this might be a projection because it's my feeling, but you feel free to tell it's if it's different. But I
We're sharing
think,
with each other.
yeah, but I think there is a piece where I also feel is that what's also not seen is the additional energy you had to invest to get to a same place and be
Mm-hmm.
perceived equally, um, as someone who had a different privilege. Um, and this is, I don't feel like this is to make a bad mark on privilege or, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just to acknowledge that the different starting positions and the incredible amount of energy that it takes to come to something that's perceived I'm
Sure.
successful and
To get there and to stay there.
yeah,
Yeah, it's not like you get there and you say, "Yay, I have arrived."
yeah,
No, that's just half the battle. And yes, there are people who see me as, well, what do you have to complain about? You have these things, you've done these things. Like I'm a privileged person as a person of color. But I worked for all of those things and everything that I have. And there's been some, good and bad along the way and some hard times. And maybe that's not what people see when they see me today. But I am proud and happy and glad to say that no, you know, I have my wounds and my scars, even what I went through at the conference. They may say, oh no, you were able to stand up there and they invited you to come speak this year and you should be grateful and what have you. But look at what it took to get there. It
mm,
wasn't like I got an invite out of the blue and said, hey, come talk to us.
yeah,
I'm there because of what happened. And that is basically the genesis of the story,
hmm,
that uh, so that is part of a privilege that people may say, you're military, you're educated, you have your own business. Yeah, but to get there, I
mm,
went through a lot. And I don't let that fall on deaf ears.
yeah. And I think there is a difference between being invited to a conference where you're firstly dismissed and being invited as incredible expertise. Look at your experience in military and NASA and becoming a therapist. We want you to speak because we found you. And I think there is a huge difference in being invited in that way. And I think it's really at least that's where I kind of think we need to work on because
Absolutely. Yes.
there are so many incredible stories that are being missed,
Mm-hmm.
because again maybe there is an assumption of who you were or how you were, and also it's best buddies and so I think
Mm-hmm.
there is so much of that that we still need to, I think, as a community and therapists, still work on, to recognize that all stories matter and need to be brought to the table.
And Alex, I am so grateful you said that. And it blows my mind the perspective and perception you have about these things. I can tell you've thought about it and that it's crossed your mind, and there's questions you still have. But sometimes I think that the only people who think and feel that way are people who look like me.
Mm.
But for you to see that is amazing to me, because and I think about that as being the overthinker as I am. Like, yeah, that's good. And yes, I can talk about my experience as a Black woman or a Black person,
Mm.
but I want to speak as a human being. That happens to be a woman who that happens to be Black. So you can even take color and culture out of it, right? And I like to use being a woman as an example because I feel like people can connect to that better and can relate to that. But then when I replace it with race, they go, ooh,
Mm.
because it fits so well. It fits very similar. So just because I'm a female or a woman, it doesn't mean, and people can choose to do this, but as a therapist, that I only see women and I can only connect and talk to women. And that's all that I serve in my practice because I'm a woman. And it's like, do you know how much you are missing? If
Yeah.
that's all you see and what you think that I can talk and relate to, I may not be you, Alex, or know what it's like to be where you're from or what it's like to immigrate to another country, but I can connect with it. I'm open enough that I can connect with that. And I would never say, oh, I know exactly what you mean. Oh,
Mm.
this is what happened to you, which a lot of times is what people like to do. No, I want to sit in that listening space and hear your story and be able to interact with you and share. And God, the more we talk, the more we realize what parts of us, you're my people and I'm your people.
Mm.
That's
And
the connection.
I often think that, the way I see sometimes a therapeutic relationship is we start from these spaces where there is a lot of projection going back and forth, which is, I think, very useful, because that's where the learning happens. But then I
Mm-hmm.
think as we go further down a therapeutic or any other relationship, it becomes idiosyncratic. It becomes the two people with their two histories, with their two respective fields that are sitting together and exploring how are we impacting each other. And I think when it comes to that place, and I was very privileged to sit with therapists who have helped me to get there with them, I think that's where connection happens, because then we start to explore what's here, what's you,
Mm-mm.
Stephanie, and me, Alex, with our histories, and how are we impacting each other? How is my fear of being abandoned impacting how we relate to each other? And then it really, as useful as culture and all these things are, it becomes, I know how this shaped me, and I'm with this person, um, with this uniqueness. And I think that's, to me, is it's the richness of the work, I think.
That is absolutely true. And I don't want to say this to minimize what you said because what you said is so profound and impactful. And I get that, completely connecting with that. And the beauty to me of being a therapist, or like I said, I have my own practice, it's just me in the practice. Um, I don't have to worry about what I look like to people when they walk in the room because they know they picked me. So they already know what I look like. So I think being able to be in that space of not like, oh, when they see me, what are they going to think? Or when I walk in this room and I'm the leader, what are they going to think? Because that gets in the way, but that's in there. But I being able to shed that armor is amazing. And I feel like if you come in my space, you've already seen me, you found my picture somewhere, you've read my profile somewhere, what to expect. So if you step in there and something about that interchange is uncomfortable for you or you don't like, it's okay if you don't stay. I'm not for you. And just to be able to understand that I'm not for everybody is great.
Mm.
Maybe I'm not the person who can help you in the way you need to be helped, but I could also sit in a space where someone who is far from being like me can say something to me about that and about their thoughts, and it doesn't ruffle my feathers.
Mm.
If somebody says, I thought all Black people were mean, that doesn't bother me,
Mm.
not at all. That's something, it's not about me, it's about them, right? So, like I said, I just appreciate being in a space that when you step through the door, you already know.
Yeah.
And I don't have to sort through that in my head.
Yeah. And I think this is also a way for those perceptions to dissipate, actually. And if we are not willing to partake in that, chances are they are not dissipating and we are reinforcing something that's already there.
Mm-hmm.
I often think of male therapists where a female client who has a history of being maltreated by males are there to actually really represent the safety and not the generalization, and
Right.
and showing by their presence, by their being, that not every single, like, that people can't just be simply put into broad brush stroke categories, and that the more we are coming back to the word idiosyncratic, the easier it gets
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
really connect, because then you connect to a person, not to a group. So I think that's, at least for me, been a big learning, how to hold those big brushstroke assumptions aside.
Oh, yeah. And then you start to realize those assumptions we had or what we thought, they're not right. They're not correct. So that's hard for some people to challenge, which takes me
Yeah.
back to where we are as a society today. There are people who are not open, who don't want to hear or give space to other people who are not their people. Because if they do, it can upset and change the balance of the very essence of who they thought they were and what they thought about you or them or whomever. And it's easier for some people to just not be open and accepting to that because of that. It will rock your world. It just does. And some people see that as a threat. And I see that as that's the beauty of being human.
Yeah, yeah, that
Mhm.
exactly. And one of quotes I got in a training was, um treat every question aimed at you not as a threat to your ego or existence, but as a new way of connecting to someone. And this is something that guides me in my practice, but I can see it's very much guiding you in your practice as well.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
wanted to say, to ask you, actually, I was sitting with the fact that you're a mom, and I was wondering, how has that experience shaped you? And what has, I don't know how it overlapped with your therapy training, but uh, how have those two somehow informed each
Oh,
other?
that's an easy question. Yeah. Um, I love being a mom. I have two sons and I love it. I feel like I'm in this role for a reason. Everyone else in my family has daughters and sons, and I'm the only one who has sons only. And I feel like I was chosen for that for a reason. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't get to experience female and women because for some reason they gravitate towards me and I've supported women and helped them. And so it's not like I'm just over here. Like I didn't even realize that would be a part of my world. It's such a huge part of my world to mentor and help lead and grow and nurture. But I grew up in a house with mostly sisters. So then now I'm in this world of a husband and two sons. So that's a big switch, right? I kind of alluded to this at the conference that being a mother of Black sons is a very tough and trying role. So they're in their 30s, but I still feel that sense of protection I have to have for them. And always still, and I'm only speaking as a mom, right? Having to let them know how much they are loved because the world may not always see you like someone who deserves to be loved. So they know that I love them, even if I'm mad at you or you did something that was pretty stupid. I hate to say stupid, but I'm talking as a mom. I can say that. I still love you.
Mm.
Um, and it's important that I don't want to nurture and, well, nurture, yes, coddle, no, even as men, because some mothers, especially Black women, can get in that role because you feel like you're their protector too in the world. But just, I mean, and they have their dad, so I have to know how much to go in and how much to stand back. But it's helped me as a woman to, it's a balance of being a strong, independent woman and also having a husband and sons who nurture and support me. So in that balance in therapy and even with couples, I don't gravitate towards women and try to stand up and defend because I know that's a part of me, but that other part is here are these men and they're not always brown people. They're people of different colors, culture, military, non-military. But I support that man sitting there too because I've lived in that world. I'm not one of them, but I've seen things from this perspective because, you know, I have a husband and I have male sons. And so I see that side too. And I understand a little bit more about the dynamics because of that. Yeah, absolutely. So I give that speech because I see couples a lot. I give that speech when they come in my office. I'm not just here for her or him, I'm here for you both, if that's the role you want me to be in. Yeah. Because a lot of times, sometimes the men feel like, oh, women are for women and whatnot. I'm here for you both and for this unit. So yeah, I can lend space to males in my practice. Black males, military males, it doesn't matter. I understand. And I could, you know, show empathy to that. And after living with these guys for all these years, you know, can make space for that. A lot of times men feel unheard.
Yes. Yeah. And I am
And I
sitting,
want them to know I hear them. Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel that. And I actually, there was an incredible theater show here that was called Four Black Boys Who Wanted to Commit Suicide but Didn't. I think that's the whole.
Yeah.
And that was for me an incredible piece where there were five, I think five Black men. It felt like a big group therapy session where
Mm-hmm.
everyone was bringing their own piece of history. And again, I think I'm coming back to what you've said, that we are not all the same when we don't want to be seen the same. And there were so many. I could actually, it felt, again, it feels very home-like. It feels very familiar because
Mm-hmm.
I can see men in Serbia behaving in a similar way,
Yeah.
uh, which is if you start to get educated and slightly kind of start to question even the norms of your own culture, which are often not, you don't agree with all of them, suddenly you
Mm-hmm.
become a betrayer. But so you feel like, oh, I'm not belonging there, but I'm not belonging here. or there was in that group of men or boys, there was someone who was gay. How is that seen in this community? So there was
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that idiosyncrasy and let's
Wow.
say intersectionality in the play, which really got me thinking. But I do agree. I can see my male clients, and in general, I really empathize with how how little there is a space for them to tell stories which are not
Yes.
stories of success.
Right. Right. And even when they are, right,
Yes.
the pressures of being in that position, even like me, people may look and say, "Oh, you made it. You've done it. You're fine." I'm
Yeah.
not fine.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I just lend space to them. They feel unheard, but there's plenty of men who aren't Black men that feel unheard. But I make space for whoever's in front of me at the moment. Feel unseen, and they feel like when they step in the world, they have to be strong.
Yeah.
Uh, and it reminds me of this too, which is a little bit different, especially for young boys of color. When my son was little, and usually little boys do this, they have like the little small pellet guns that they play with and whatnot. And one day I looked up and I in our backyard or back garden. My son was little. He's a little kid. And I saw him back there with his little play gun doing this. And I was like, and I just ran out. I'm like, no, no. And he just looked so terrified because I didn't want someone to mistake him for someone trying to do harm when he's just a little kid. But
Mm-hmm.
he has to be taught and learn that you can't walk in the world maybe the same way that someone else can if they're in the backyard playing with their gun, or if they're walking down the street and they look like a threat, or you know I'm like, they're they're just big goofy teenagers like everyone else, but that's not how the world sees them.
Yeah.
Either you're an infant or you're a threat.
Yeah.
And so, if you knew that every time you left your house or had to walk in the world, that's hard.
That's an
That's a
incredible
lot.
amount of self-monitoring that takes so much energy.
Yeah. For women, for Black women, for Black men, maybe women of other cultures and whatnot too. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. But this is the perspective, because if I get passionate and I start speaking and with passion, why are you so angry? I'm
Yeah.
not angry. And I had to learn and find my voice, like we talked about, to say, I'm not angry. I'm just passionate.
Yeah.
Or I
Yeah.
just want to get my point across. I'm not angry. Stop trying to label me as being angry.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had in my training a moment where I felt like my curiosities equals aggression. And it took me a lot of time to undo those. There is a really nice paper which is called the cultural parent. So the culture that works through the parent of the child, which is what you've just described.
Yeah.
And often and that's what really what pains me a lot of the times is that then our kids, well, I don't have kids, but kids turned against the parents in that oppression, uh, whereas that was
Mhm.
a parent's way of trying to protect them, and it creates a gap of pain.
Yeah.
And this to me is something that I felt a lot of grief about, in my story, in my history, especially coming from a very patriarchal country where women are seen really as a lower being, basically. Um, and how angry I was at my dad, but then starting to understand there was a voice that was speaking through him. That it
Mm-hmm.
was and this is not to absolve anyone of taking responsibility to question that voice inside, but I think it's really hard to resist knowing that what is the field that you live in.
Yeah. Because you know what your intention is or your goal is. And I don't think when I say our parents, I mean older generation always knew or learned the best way to execute that with their
Yes.
children.
Yes.
So I always say, based on Maya Angelou's quote, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you do better. I hope I quoted it just right,
It
but
is. It is. Yeah. It's
yeah,
one of my
that's my
favorites
that's my
as well.
that's my favorite. Um, so one of the things I had to learn with my boys is, you don't always have to be so firm or, because I felt like as the woman sometimes, in order for them not to be disrespectful, I had to let them know that you cannot do that. Um, but I could still be gentle and loving toward them. And I think that's what I love the most is that I could say, no, don't shoot, don't go outside. And then I had to go, you know what? I always reminded myself, tell them you love them. Tell them you love them at the end, no matter what. And I'm like, you can't go out there and do that. And why? It's always interesting to me how people that aren't of color say, I don't want to expose my child to racism. It's like we don't get a choice. It comes knocking on our door.
Yeah.
So from young, you have to explain the best way you can why that other kid doesn't want to play with you or why they called you that name. That starts very young. And so you have to explain why I don't want you outside. But I wasn't hurting anybody. I'm doing, yeah, but, if someone saw him as a threat, it's done. And that's been proven.
Hmm.
So, yeah, and just
Time and time
still
again,
follow up.
unfortunately.
Yes, follow up with I love you. And I just try to protect you the best way I can. And even now I tell them that still. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. And I'm wondering, what was, as you started your training as a therapist, what was the most challenging for you to go through? And you said you are eclectic in your work, so what are all the things that support your practice?
Um, Geez, that's a good question. I used to say I'm a Rogerian, I'm all about the human and the person and I think that's still the base of it, the baseline. But I've learned so much, if I need to sprinkle some CBT in there, I sprinkle a little CB. I use what I need in the moment. If we have to go back and reflect on childhood, so I dabble in a little bit of what I've learned about different things because a lot of studies, a lot of books, and a lot of the academic training didn't even include people of color. So to try to hold firm and true to a certain model of therapy may not work. So I had to kind of pick and choose from different ones, but it's still about the human connection for me, you know? Um, So I can't say that I just do one.
Mhm.
I cherry pick what I need in the moment.
Mm.
And it became more and more apparent. I'm always asking questions, just like I asked at the conference, because I don't just sit there and go, oh, okay, well, it doesn't make sense to me, but okay.
Mm.
But uh, sometimes I feel like I ask questions that maybe other people are thinking about, but they don't say. You know
Mm.
how they say, some people say the quiet part out loud? I ask out loud.
Mhm.
So I'm like, wait a minute. I'm reading about all these studies and all this, when they did research and whatnot, but I don't really see anything that speaks directly to my existence.
Mhm.
Um, or if it does, it's based on trauma and traumatic experience and being poor or being broken, which feeds into the question that I asked too. What about people who aren't poor or broken or grew up in an inner city or in these bad, depressed conditions? What about the everyday person who get up and go to work that look like me, who are educated, who do the best they can? What about those people? And you don't see that really addressed.
Mm.
So, very small piece in study, right? And when you're learning how to become a therapist, it's not a big piece of it. Um, so you almost have to navigate your way and filter through and realize that you can migrate away from saying, I am sticking to this type of therapy because it just doesn't work for everyone the same.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, in your personal therapy, what was the thing that was transformative for you? What really kind of made the most impact?
Ask me that question again.
So in your personal work or your personal therapy, what was in the work that made the biggest impact to shift something inside?
I have to speak from being a therapist, right?
Mhm.
Um, the biggest impact. I don't know. I would have to say that just feeling not included. That surprised me as I learned and read and that not being included,
Mm,
and how can I sit in that space for people that come in my door?
yeah. So the
Whether that
awareness of how big that part is.
the absence of,
Yeah.
yeah. And when they talk about, and maybe that's one of those things that's in our implanted in the brain of a Black American, right? That you're sitting and waiting to hear about the part that's really not spoken.
Hmm.
Because I do think being a Black American and then walking in the world in other spaces is very different. People say you guys always see things as color and race, but that's the world we live in here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so even if I go to another country and they may not immediately speak to that, doesn't mean they don't see it. I am who I am and you see me, but it's different. It's different.
Yeah.
But I believe that still most of the places that I've been to, they have their person or their people that they may treat the same way, but it may not be the people that look like me.
Mm.
I'm being delicate. Can you tell?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It may not be, we don't like this person because they're Black. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But it could be, no, these culture of people. But it's still the same disregard and disrespect. And they don't see that. Just because you're not talking about me in this moment, you're still using the same model to say why you don't like someone because of the way they look or what they eat or what they sound like. It's the same thing. It's
Mm.
just not directed at me in the moment.
And I also imagine, I mean, again, something from my experience, and maybe I'm projecting, but a lot of the richness of your culture gets lost in the speaking, as you said, of the traumatic spaces, so that you almost don't really, you yourself cannot connect to the great things you have inherited from from your roots. And
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wondering if you can speak to that, if you can speak to those incredible things you have inherited um, from your family and from the resilience and I don't know practices that might have been different or not. I mean, it may be because you're in the US that has been, let's say, westernized. But I know
Mm-hmm.
for me, there is something about the song and the way we were lived, the way we shared food around the table. That's something that I carry as incredible strength that is often mislooked because the only thing that's seen is all the trauma you've
Mm-hmm.
gone through.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is such a great comment and question. Um, so in someone else's eyes, and that's not the lens we're looking through, but I want to recognize it for a moment. They could probably look at the way that I was raised and brought up and say, oh, they were poor or disadvantaged. But within my own community, no. Um, I had family around. And like I said, thank you for asking me that because it gets overlooked. I was raised around my cousins, and I had my parents and I had my siblings, and we always joke about it in my family because I'm towards being the youngest. So I had the privilege of being nurtured, maybe a little bit more than the older ones, just by birth order, if you want to talk about theories. I was maybe in the right position. I wasn't the baby, but I was close. So that nurturing and being cared for, it was like your older siblings had an obligation to take care and look after you. So I had cousins and I had a brother and I had and that sense of community too. That's not always talked about and seen. That kind of looked after you and took care of you. Um, some teachers were great and they recognized you and encouraged you, supported you, all of that. Um, and also just growing up and people recognizing things in you that are good. My mother always says that. I'm like, does anything surprise you? I could say, Mom, I did this, this, this. And she goes, Oh, I know. Like, what do you mean you know? Because to her, she's always seen that in me and my people in my family, and they will tell me that. So it's always that reassurance and that nurturing that runs deep in my community. I could say that as a person of color, but we can't ignore also that generational shifts are taking place. So someone 3 decades younger than me may not know what I'm talking about. So I can only speak from where I came up in my experience. Um, and then as I became older and when I joined the military, there were just people who saw things in me that they wanted to help nurture and grow. And there were times I haven't always been brave, right? Where someone said, We got you. Go do your thing. We got you. We support you. And so all the people who have molded me, nurtured me, and helped me grow have not always looked like me. But I come from those people who look like me, that planted that seed in the first place. Motivation, encouragement. You can do it. You're going to have adversity. We don't come through our world and our life thinking, why did that happen to me? That's horrific. We understand that that's part of our existence.
Mm.
So maybe that's part of the resilience.
Yeah.
So, but other people have contributed and poured into me um, as I got older and mature and grew in my military life and even working, being able to work at NASA, people poured into me. So I'm great. Those are my people. I'm grateful for that. But I also make sure that I support people, whether they look like me or not. Maybe it is a young Black woman who needs to understand how am I motivated, how am I encouraged, and why that I can pour into. Or maybe it's you know, a white guy or a military guy who's like, how are you managing? How are you coping? And, I can pour into that. So, yes, I know who I am. I'm a proud Black or African American person, steep in tradition and culture of that. I've learned that I can be this professional person on this stage and still be unapologetically me.
Mm.
And even in my fifth decade of life, I'm still learning and growing that because even in the military, you learn to be poised and make sure that you present and project well and that your hair, not a hair is out of place and you're speaking without an accent or dialect. And even in the, therapeutic community and you're learning and becoming educated and you're speaking and you're projecting and you're this. But the older I get, um, the more I just settle into me.
Mhm.
I think about that even being invited and coming back to speak in a couple of months. I'm nervous, right? but it's okay. And I think I'm going to be surrounded by people who know so much more than I do and who, um, have all this training and experience and whatnot. Yes, I am. I take a deep breath and I say, that's okay.
Mm,
The only thing I can be is the best person I know how to be, and that's me. I
mm,
don't, I won't go wrong or get lost in being me. Whether that's curly hair me or brown skin me or short Stephanie female me, it's all still me, and nobody can do that better than me. I
yeah.
don't have to worry about if I sound different or look different. That I'm not in that structure anymore.
And
Just me.
I think that's as you said, like that there are people who have more knowledge than me, and I feel there was a really good lecture in my psychotherapy training, which I really love knowledge as a thing, because I mean, as a scientist, I really think a lot about how do we make knowledge, what knowledge is. And
Mm-hmm.
one sentence that I really liked is that knowledge is a story that survived. And I think and I'm going to use the word oppressive systems make knowledge uh, uh, as something that belongs to someone, whereas think knowledge is a life experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we forget that our difference is our knowledge. In a way, it's the path you walked that is your knowledge. But
Mm-hmm.
there is this, and I can relate to that idea when I come, oh, okay, this person has more training or more experience.
Yeah.
But life is the training and the experience. But somehow, because there are these structures where, like, you get access to something,
Yes.
that there is this ingrained belief that, oh, suddenly all that I've gathered from this path suddenly is not equally valuable, or and I think that that to me is always a reminder that we create knowledge from stories and from observing reality, but no one has um how do you say, like ownership of how we interpret that reality, because it's too complex for one human being to comprehend. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why we need each other. I think that's why we need each other's views and discussions, because we are all looking at the same thing, but we're not seeing the same thing.
Right. And that's okay. We don't lose a part of ourselves because we open
Exactly.
up to hear and accept what you're saying and what you're dealing with. That's your reality.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk
No,
over
no,
you.
no, no.
But yeah,
I
that's
want
why
to,
when people say that, oh, you did this and things must be great and that's amazing. I said, but I always like to tell them about the struggle and
yeah,
about the challenges too, because even in marriage, because I've been married 38 years and people go, oh my God, that's amazing. And you must have all the answers and all the secrets. And I'm like, no, I've had struggles too, because I need them to know that I'm human too.
yeah,
And where you are, even if it's not where I am, it doesn't mean you can't get there or somewhere or better.
different.
Yeah, that's right. And I want them to know that you're not lost, you're seen.
Hmm. Oh, I needed to hear that tonight.
There you go. Yeah.
And I want to ask you now, like, I feel like we've talked a lot about how we hold hope for others. And I think, what was your most consistent and greatest hope, either for yourself or for the people you work with or for your sons? Is there something that encapsulate everything?
Um, if I made an impact where someone felt like it was life changing for them,
Hmm.
that's hope. And even for myself, because um, yeah, there was a time that, I was diagnosed with cancer. And I'm like, what impact have I had on people or in the world or whatnot? And so I'm still here and life is still evolving and going and I'm impacting people and whatnot. And I'm like, so
Hmm.
it feels good when people say to me something along the lines of, I learned so much from you. It changed my life.
Mm,
That makes me feel like whatever I was given, whatever was poured into me and for me, that I was able to take a piece of it and give it to somebody else without losing me.
mm,
I can share it. I don't have to keep it all for myself. Willing to share it. And so when you can make an impact on someone like that,
mm,
that is that's that's a lot.
mm.
Grateful. I'm grateful.
And I'm grateful that I'm sitting here tonight with you because I'm sitting with again the hope and the courageousness that needed to keep you going through, well, even being diagnosed with cancer, because I do remember you telling me that in the
Mhm.
trauma conference. And and even then I thought, and wow, and you've managed to voice yourself and to still stand for yourself. And no, I sometimes catch myself in the like rots of self-pity, and
Mhm.
you know,
Me too.
I can't get through this. And I kind of I admire the strength it takes to choose life day after day,
Yeah.
when life throws these things at you.
Hmm. And
And
then you think about, you know how many people it took for you to be here?
yeah,
You're amazing for that alone.
yeah,
You know how many people it took for you to be here. Yeah.
yeah. And if I can ask about your cancer diagnosis, and
Hmm.
if you're willing to share, what was your guiding light in that, and what was grounding you going through that? And maybe also what was in that experience, because I recently, actually 2 days ago, I interviewed someone who has lost a really good friend, and we spoke about the difficulty of being a cancer either patient or survivor, and how it's really hard to talk about it openly, even with family or friends, because there's this threading of we don't
Hmm.
know how to be around this topic. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, what has this experience taught you? How, what, if you, whatever you're willing to share.
Um, so it's been about 9 years. And when I first found out, my immediate thought was for other people.
Mm,
How are they going to handle this? How are they going to, not even me. It's like, how
mm,
this is going to impact that person or those people. And included in that were my clients. I'm
mm,
like, how am I going to do this? It's me again sitting with Stephanie, being an overthinker and processing on my own before, it's a pattern here.
yeah.
um, so when I look back on it, I recognize that when I share with people that that thing, that in that moment, I'm more concerned about them than me. Yeah, I'm like, how? There's no way to delicately say this. I'm telling you, I was consumed with them,
Mm,
not even me. I didn't really tell a lot of people. And here's the part that had to do with me. I didn't tell my clients at all when I was going through it. I
mm,
had to decide how I wanted to navigate that. And in thinking about the other person, I'm like, I don't want them worried about me. So I didn't share it.
mm,
They're already coming with pain and struggle and challenges. We're human, that stuff gets interchanged. And I didn't want to add that to their thoughts. So that gave me a little bit of, I guess, denial. I don't want to say denial necessarily, but to be able to go step out in the world and walk through it without somebody going, oh, because
mm,
that's not what I wanted. And to avoid that as well, I wore a wig. So no one knew unless I shared it. Um, because I didn't want to see that face and get that response of,
mm,
okay. I didn't want or like that. That gave me a bit of I could disassociate from having cancer and going through that and go put on a wig and walk in the world and be as normal as I want without that being, at the center of every conversation I have. So
Mm.
I was grateful that I can walk in that. I didn't share it. I shared it with my friends and family and people close to me. I even started a different job. No one knew. I went through training in this new job. No one knew. And I would talk to the people treating me and say, hey, I need to do ABC. Is that okay? And I balanced that out. And so no one knew.
Mm.
Um, I had a great support system, and my husband, hands down, uh, that man, I tell you, he cares for me deeply and he took care of me deeply.
Mm.
Um, and my sons, and, I had that support system. So that's what I walked in. And there's times where I would get deeply paranoid and scared. And what if I don't survive this? That certainly would creep up on me. And I allowed myself to go through that and have that pity party and then make a decision that, it's really not in my hands. I can only do the things that I'm supposed to do, go get my treatments, eat this way, do these things, but I have no control over the outcome.
Mm.
And that's where my faith took over. In faith, they talk about surrendering. And instead of me trying to hold on to the fact of what can I do to manage or control this, I did the things I was supposed to do, went to the appointments and whatnot, but I surrendered the rest because I couldn't control it. Yeah.
Mm.
I talked about it after the fact and later.
Mm.
But I always shared with women, um, go get your mammograms. And, even for me, it popped up before 12 months. So get out of your head that just because you do your mammogram every 12 months, if you're even in mammogram age, right, that means you're okay, because it doesn't. I found mine at month 10, and it was already a sizable lump at that point. So get that out of your head and always check. And I let people know my husband found my lump.
Mm.
So I always tell men, feel them up, guys. You know them. Feel it. You know what's not right. Whatever it takes. Right. So
Yeah.
there's my little humor in that. But, to be able to just acknowledge it and deal with it and work through it. And I just had amazing people in my corner. And
Mm.
even when I felt weak or down, um, one thing was I didn't hide it. I talked to my husbands and sons, and we agreed, I don't know how much they followed through with it, that if we were feeling badly in the moment, it was okay to talk about it.
Mm.
Don't feel like you're protecting me by not talking about it, because it's always in my head. So, it's okay to come sit next to me and cry or tell me how it crossed your mind and how heavy it was for you today. And
Mm.
I could do the same. So that was helpful.
Yeah, I'm sitting with that actually, how important it is, and in how many families that paralyzes the family almost. And it sounds like, at least maybe because of your training, this was somewhat more present, and it wasn't something that's being kind of pushed aside. And if I can just ask one more question there with that, did it change something in the way that you treat yourself? Did you relate the cancer appearance with, oh, I haven't been kind enough to myself? Or did you just accept it as something that happened to your physical body, and you didn't really uh, kind of think much about the psychological meaning of it? So how was that for you?
I wish I could say that I exercise more and eat better, but that's not true.
Mm.
But I have to reconcile that. That doesn't mean it's okay if it comes back. And I feel like cancer survivors, can't speak for all of them, but for me, I feel like it's something right here
Yeah.
that can show up again at any time.
Yeah.
I could either worry about that or I can live my life. I've always been the type of person who loves learning, living, and growing and whatnot. But after that experience, even more so.
Mm.
Tomorrow's not promised. And you better live today while you can and enjoy yourself. And
Mm.
you watch other people, even younger than me, or, lose their lives tragically or quickly or however. And you think, oh my gosh, that's not supposed to happen. But I really just try to enjoy my life and live my life. I was like that before, but a little more now.
Mm.
It reminds me when I was going through treatment and our anniversary, my husband and I, wedding anniversary was coming up. And I talked to my husband about flying to New York, which is about a 3.5 hour plane ride. And he's looking at me like, what? You're going through chemo and you're talking about going to New York to celebrate our anniversary? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I'm sure the doctors wouldn't like that. And, we shouldn't do that and all that. So our next doctor visit, which he went to each and every one with me, I asked the doctor, I said, would I be able to, just as an example, go on a trip? And they're like, yeah. Can I fly? I mean, if it was like about a 4 hour flight, would that be okay? My husband's looking at me like, no way. And they're like, yeah, no problem with that. Just make sure you stay hydrated, you take care of yourself, because you begin to learn your cycle with chemo, like when you start to feel sick or when you feel weak. And like I've learned those things. And they're like, no, nothing wrong with that. Go for it. And I looked at him and I said,
Yes.
and he was just like, oh my God, woman, my goodness. And we got on a plane and we went and we had a good time. I just had to learn though, because he's very observant. He's always watching me. Are you okay? Are you okay? I said, you have to stop asking me that. Let's just say this. If I'm not okay, or if I'm getting close to not being okay, I promise I'll tell you. If you promise you stop asking me every minute. Deal. So we went and we had fun. And that was the beginning of me taking the extra step of living even more completely and fully as much as I can.
Mm.
Yeah. I could sit there and, feel the heaviness of it and wait for something, or I can go to New York and enjoy myself in the moment as long as I take care of myself. And us making that deal made the difference. He
Mm.
felt like he didn't have to watch me so hard and so intently. He probably still did, but he gave me space to say, let me tell you when I'm tired or I'm thirsty or I'm hungry. So, yeah, it was a new reality we had to navigate, but we learned to. But
Mm.
we enjoyed our anniversary. Yeah.
And and what I'm staying with is the choicefulness you allowed yourself. And that I think is really um well, I would say it's unusual for me to witness,
Hmm.
to really allow yourself that to see that there are choices in situations like this, because there always are,
Yeah.
although it looks kind of grim on the outside, I think there always are small places of choicefulness.
Yes.
And I think you've
Yes.
illustrated this with your example. So after all of these journeys and everything you've gone through, what
Yeah.
then what then feels like success to you? What does it feel like, you've gotten something that outwardly feels successful, you've gotten through something that feels like, oh wow, was hard and I've gone through this. So what is now success for you?
I'm not done yet, though.
Oh, no, I don't imagine you are.
Miles to go before I sleep. Success, I hate to define it that way because that means you've arrived and there's nothing left. And I don't feel that way. So Let me caveat by saying that. But as I evolve as a therapist, I'm like, okay, I'm helping, but I want to do this. All right. I always want to do more for the people. And I feel like, and I hear from my clients sometimes, you know what, you're helping me, but what about my spouse? Okay, so I do couples counseling. I do like Gottman treatment in my practice. So I'm helping couples and I'm helping them navigate and talk and communicate and listen. Okay, great. But I'm still missing those people who, when they hear the word therapy, they think it's not for them. Or I still have people say, I've never seen a Black therapist. I don't know how in this day and age, but I hear that. Or people who can learn from me. I'm a Black woman and a Black person, but I still talk about things outside of that. So I feel like I would love to speak more, to be on a stage, helping people learn and grow and see things differently. So I'm kind of pursuing that a little bit more. And one day I would love to write a book.
Mm.
That would be pieces of success that still eludes me right now. Yeah, being able to talk to more people, help more people in whatever way that looks like or means for anyone, and just being able to pen it in a book. Absolutely.
Mm.
So, yeah, but all of that while carrying all the things that people have gone through that didn't get as far as I did. All that comes with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't wait for that book to be out.
Me too.
Yeah.
As soon as I, clear off some other things and I get someone to help me and work with me to do it, absolutely. I would
Mm.
love to. Yeah.
So I feel we've traversed quite a big terrain.
I
And
know, I know.
I'm wondering, is there anything that I haven't asked, but whenever you imagined in, big or when you were big or small to get a stage, you were like,
Mhm.
oh, if I just get this stage and if I get this like big microphone, this is what I want people to hear. And you feel like you didn't say tonight or you didn't say before. Is there anything that you wanna?
I would emphasize the importance of being connected.
Mm,
We talked about that loosely, right? But I just wanted to make it a point, put that exclamation point on it, the value of healthy connection, the importance of being connected. And like I said, I don't like to use labels too much, like they have certain names for, when people feel like I'm trying to impose my culture on them. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I want to hear you, and I might have some things to share with you, and they may not even center around culture, but because of the fact we are innately sharing and exchanging and interchanging information. We
mm,
have a lot in common.
mm,
Yeah. And even if it were a little in common, it's still that connection we've made as human beings and that we've made and created space for, and that I'm a better person for it.
mm,
So I definitely appreciate you opening up and sharing with me. I'm happy to answer those questions because not everyone is curious in that way. So this has been a pleasure for me for sure.
mm,
So yeah, just if I had that microphone and I could talk about the value of connection and interchanging and all that and just making an exclamation point to it, absolutely. That's
mm.
what I would do.
I can relate to that so much. And the last question, which is a bit of my kind of idiosyncratic question is there an absurd thing about you that not many people know about, but is somehow connected? So like, no one would ever assume that.
I love to sing. Now, whether or not I can, I don't care. I'm that person who's in my car and I'll turn up that song and oh my, I don't care what I look like. I don't care what I sound like. It feels good to my body.
Mm.
And so I'm just rocking out in my car. Or, I have this little room in my house. It's very small. You close it, the acoustics are amazing, and I sound incredible in there by myself. Yeah, I love that. So I love singing and I love dancing, and I just love the expression of those things um, when I need to redirect, and me recognizing how good they feel to me. So
Mm.
those things, I love that. Yeah, and little trivia things. I like knowing things that aren't always common knowledge.
Mm.
Yeah,
I can relate to the singing part, especially
yeah,
in places that sound acoustic.
perfect, right? Perfect.
Amazing. And do you have any questions for me?
um, just as if there's anything else kind of similar to what you've asked me that we haven't covered or talked about that still is coming up for you,
Mhm.
that you go, man, I wish I'd shared that, or ask or share.
Mm.
I'd love to hear it.
Well, I was thinking to tell you this after we finish, but when I was small, I really wanted to have hair like you.
Oh,
And I
that's funny.
always,
Oh, we can have a whole discussion about
uh,
hair. We can have a
yes,
whole discussion.
I know, I know. That's exactly why I was like kind of
Yeah,
hesitating because I know there is a lot of things about hair and also a lot.
yeah.
I loved. I don't know if you know the movie. It's called Nappily Ever After.
Yes.
It's
You've seen that?
it's my favorite. I love it.
OMG.
I watched it like more than 3 or 4 times, and I
Yes.
cried because I felt her lip. It was the time I was going through a divorce, and so
Mhm.
it felt like her liberation uh, felt very coincidental with mine,
Mm,
and
mhm.
so in a way, uh, every time I watch it, I really connect to that moment of my life, but
Yeah.
also like what it meant for her to shave her hair and what it meant to be and how again coming back to culture, how culture
Mhm.
uh, was speaking somehow through her hair. Uh,
Absolutely.
that was absolutely incredible for me. But for me, that's a saddening part because I'm as a child in Serbia, I would have not made those assumptions because the
Mhm.
only thing I
Mhm.
wanted is to have that lovely, amazing curly hair. And I literally, my mom, she actually had, she did the opposite, so she would have a perm
Yes.
so that she has
Yeah.
that. So I find it really amazing how there is that assumption, how should I look like so that I fit in this culture without knowing that I, as part of that perceived other, actually might really love your hair. So,
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. It's a journey for sure.
yeah.
And, I thought about this before, how, people with hair texture like mine, how many years we spent straightening,
Yes.
trying to keep it straight. If you get it wet, it's going to look like this after it's wet. And don't get it wet and don't sweat and don't, you're trying to keep that look, right?
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes we add hair and sometimes we change the color and whatnot. But we do it, but I also think many women of other cultures do it too.
Yes.
So even if you're highlighting your hair, I feel like it's that what is interpreted as the pinnacle of beauty, right? Of what beauty looks like. Is it blonde hair, blue eye?
Yeah.
Is that the pinnacle of beauty? Because you have contact lenses, you have highlights, you have hair color. And now, what beauty is being turned on its head and redefined. Is beauty plump lips? Is beauty a deep tan or curly hair? What is beauty now?
Mm.
But if you think about it, I said, man, there are women who are not of color who straighten their hair too. I don't think I realized how much before. Like they might have naturally wavy hair, which I think is gorgeous. When I see women in public and they're wearing their hair like that, I compliment them. And they do just like I do. Oh, this whole thing, and oh, it's all over my head. But to see those big, beautiful waves and that long dark hair or what, or red hair, it's gorgeous. But I feel like we were all trying in some way, shape, or form to conform
Yeah.
for acceptance.
Yeah.
And the straighter your hair was, or I don't know. I can't speak for women who are not of color who still feel like they need to get there, you know,
Yeah.
having long hair or, straight hair. We're all frying our hair, So, yeah, I appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you. And it's been a journey and it still is a journey.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
imagine there is so much. Yeah, there is so much in the
Yeah, we
hair.
could
I mean,
still talk about that.
even for me, I mean, when I came to London, the first thing I did, so I had this really long hair until my
Oh,
belly,
wow.
and then the first thing I cut it until here, and then I've done this really big shift, and it was something of a liberation as well. So there was a lot in my hair as well, and I think it comes back to how culture speaks to our bodies, and how much it's a journey, as you said, to
It is.
really re-own every single part of our bodies as
Yes.
ours.
Yeah,
uh, and hairstyle is one of them. But
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, this was really lovely. I don't have at the moment any thing to add, but I do want to ask you, where can people find you? Uh,
Okay.
and yeah, and anything you want to say about the way you work or what you do for so that people can connect if they need your support.
Okay. Well, like I said, in my practice, I do mostly couples therapy and I do use the Gottman method, sprinkled in with some other eclectic things. And it's funny when people say you have to choose a specific part. I haven't done that yet in all these years of therapy. So I still work with individuals and I work with people who were in the military or who are. Um, I like to do workshops for couples. So, in Florida, I'm a licensed therapist in Florida, but workshops can be done in speaking. That's how I increase that audience, right? And if people want to find me, my website is Beyond, but the name of my practice is Beyond Solace Counseling.
Mm.
And yeah, my website is beyondsolace.com. And I've also have, a tab on there where I sell these shirts. You're my people if I'm your people. So yeah, that's my message. And like I said, usually if someone comes to me and say, I need help with this, and I feel like if I can help them, I'm like, okay, come on in.
Mm.
So I need to hear it first before I say yes or no. But yeah, mostly couples.
Okay.
So yeah,
Well, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being my guest, and really thank you for you and everything you've gone through to bring this story to us.
no, thank you. Thanks for having me and remembering me and, you know, giving me this platform to be able to connect with you and speak again. I'm grateful for it and I'm grateful for you. And I thank you very, very much. And I'll be in England in September for the trauma conference at Oxford as a panelist this time. So maybe we can connect while I'm there.
Definitely, definitely.
Yes.